Yesterday I was looking at one of the new trays I have that is sitting on the germination pad at about 80 degrees, and I noticed that on the end that was the farthest from the wick, from the reservoir, it was dry, which is not the effect that I want. And that has led to a dream basically about another way to do this, which I think will increase the odds that the supply of moisture will be consistent. And that is basically to use multiple wicks. And there's a guy who does this soilless thing using a mesh type of tray, but I happen to have this stock of trays with holes in the bottom, which I actually bought by accident. I misordered, but I figured one day I would have a use for them, and now I do. And the basic idea here is that I've used a 1/4-inch drill bit to make some of the holes bigger here, and I've got some pieces of paracord, the old favorite here. These are this one's maybe 20 inches long, and some of these are more like 18 inches. But what I'm going to do is string this few inches of cord through the hole here on this side, and a few inches on this side. So you see you need a little bit bigger hole. So yeah, there's, if we can see, anyway, they're hanging down a couple of inches, and you'll see why in a minute. And then on top there's this kind of nice loop of string, and I'm going to put a second one sort of in the middle. Now again, look to see if a few inches are hanging down. Make it in a nice shape there. And put one towards the other end. Pull it through. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see see these hanging down here. So they might not need to be that long actually. There we go. Put them out the side so I can see how long they are. There we go. Okay, so as usual, I'm going to lay paper towels over this. So because some seeds have a tendency to go out near the edge, I'm going to shape these towels here to stand up on the edge a little bit. Okay. 2 layers of towels. So once the towels are in place and soaked, they're going to anchor the position of the wicks. So this is my plant food fertilizer, which is a weak hydroponic solution plus some liquid seaweed for additional micronutrients and some amino acids. The next thing that I'm going to add to my formula is to take some fertilizer that has mycorrhiza in it and mix it in some water and also add a dash of that. And the amino acids will feed the mycorrhiza, which will in turn do good things for the plants. And this is going to be a sunflower planting. I suppose I should measure this. The last batch of sunflowers I made, I used 1 ounce of sunflower seeds to cover half of a 10-20 tray. So I'm going to guess that I'm going to get close to that just by sprinkling stuff on here in a reasonable density. I have been thinking lately, particularly in regard to the pea sprouts, that the measured quantity on that one time was 3.5 ounces for a half tray. That's too much. I'm thinking, and when you look at what's going on in the tray, you see that a goodly number of the seeds don't seem to be sprouting. So I think it might be better to somewhat reduce the density of the seeds. Hopefully the germination rate will be sufficient to give you a good stand that consistently. You should measure this. This is kind of, I'm still at the experimental stage, but the experiment at this point has to do with getting into more of a production mode where I'm doing full trays, consistently, and doing something with the results, giving them away to the homeless, feed centers if necessary, selling them if possible. I think this is going to be a successful business. The other thing is, you see I'm just putting these on dry. You can see places where there is discussion about soaking versus not soaking. I think I've done it both ways. Who knows? We'll see here. So I'll spread these out. And here is where the real magic of this method is going to come in, which is I've got all these wicks hanging down and water running out the bottom. But the idea here is that instead of the glasses that you've seen on other videos for reservoirs, I'm going to use a tray that has no holes. And I'm just going to tuck these wicks in there, and we will see how that goes. So my expectation on maintaining this will be that on a daily basis I would just pull up the end of this and look to see if there's a reasonable amount of water in there, and then fill it up as apparently necessary. One could also get into measuring that over the long run. One should try to be as precise as possible about some of these things. And I just thought of another tweak, which is, when you think about it, you realize that when you set these trays down, they set very close together. And this is not the final answer because they're a little bit thin, but what I'm going to do is lay these little thin rods here underneath to provide space. I think 1/4-inch dowels might turn out to be the better choice on this, but this is a start. Here's how I'm going to solve the problem of putting some space between the upper and lower trays. So I'm going to measure this kind of from the round area to the round area. I'm going to call this 19.5 inches just to be a little bit on the safe side. I took one of the trays to Lowe's with me and concluded that the 1/4-inch dowel is the best size for doing this. So I'm going to mark off 19.5 inches. I'm doing 10 trays, and I calculated that if I got 8 dowels I would have enough to do the 10 trays. 2 19.5 sections will do 1 tray. The remainder, with 8 dowels, I get 8 remainders, and I have 2 more trays to do, so 4 of the remainders on each tray will finish the job. So in the old days of carpentry, and even now, they say measure twice, cut once. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, I definitely have the 19.5-inch marks. So I'm going to take my handy dandy El Cheapo miter box here and my miter saw. And cut these dowels. I'll press it against the far end. A little bit of light sanding on the end. Okay, so the method of attachment is going to be using these 4-inch cable ties that I got from Lowe's. This was at Christmas time when they had these nice green ties that fits in with the garden. And here's the tray I set up. I'm going to go with a 5/16 hole just to keep it on the safe side here. And at this little outcropping here, I'm just going to drill a hole right below the edge of the lip. Be careful about where you place your finger. Might be a safer way to do this when the trays don't have anything in them. Okay, close enough. So there's a right way and a wrong way to orient these. I'm going to lace them in from this side and just put this guy up in there. Fits just fine. And pull this around. Now I'm going to keep the big end right inside the bowl here, because that will give me a little bit of a bump to hold trays if I set them on top of each other. Okay. Finally trim off the ends. back into the water tray. Put the wicks all in. There we go. Alright. Now you've got a nice spacing, maybe, you know, for sure maybe 3/8 of an inch up above the water level. Also want to mention that in the future, the next runs of these, I'm going to cut the wicks like 12 inches long and then spread them across like these outer grooves or something like that. You know, you've got the deep grooves in these trays, string them into that, and then they'll hang down about an inch. Well, let's see, 9 inches, inch and a half. They hang down about 1.5 inches into the water. That should work well. And the thing will be to put one in the middle, one about 4 inches, 3-4 inches in on each end. That should distribute the water evenly all through the system.